In this recount, we will explore the stories of the 10 most notable young school shooters, taking a look at the skills and realities behind this grim reality. Let's take a look at 10 school shooters and the heartbreaking events they experienced in prison. Number 10. T.J. Lane. One would expect that being arrested and taken to prison would transform a criminal for the better, changing their life forever. But I guess that wasn't the case for Thomas Michael, T.J. Lane III, born on September 19, 1994, in Cleveland, Ohio. Lane had a troubled upbringing and a history of behavioral issues. It was known that his parents had a dysfunctional relationship, and he had severe difficulties at home. Things got worse when his parents divorced due to his father's abuse. It was no surprise that Lane attended Lake Academy, an alternative school for students with emotional or behavioral problems. There were even reports that he had a problematic relationship with other students and a history of disciplinary issues. These early warning signs and a problematic family environment contributed to the complex factors that ultimately influenced Lane's life as a whole. On February 27, 2012, Lane entered the cafeteria at Chardon High School and, to everyone's surprise, opened fire with a .22 caliber pistol, tragically killing 3 students and seriously injuring 3 others. He was eventually arrested for the shooting and faced charges for the incident. What was truly disturbing was that he didn't even seem to show any remorse during the trial process. He wore a white t-shirt with the word killer written on the front on the day of his sentencing, showed the middle finger to the victims' families, and laughed when he was described as an animal and a monster. I mean, that's probably one of the worst things any criminal could do. But for a guy like T.J. Lane, it was just the tip of the iceberg. He pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole. He was then incarcerated at the Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio, before his failed attempt to be Michael Schofield in a foiled prison escape. Lane's poor track record demonstrated his struggles to adapt to life behind bars. One significant incident was when prison officials discovered he had 3 different tattoos on his chest, for which he was given 10 days of segregation in July 2013. During his 18-month stay at the Allen Correctional Institution, he accumulated 7 violations, including incidents for smoking marijuana and displaying disrespectful behavior toward superiors. Imagine being in prison and refusing to perform tasks because he allegedly refused to do so on 2 occasions while attending class. His complaints about education always seemed like a broken record, so his teacher allowed him to draw in class. However, Lane drew images of himself with the word killer and would draw cats on his math homework. On September 11, 2014, the unrepentant Lane, along with 2 other inmates, escaped from the institution, achieving this by constructing a 135-foot improvised ladder over several months and bypassing a broken security camera that was negligently left unrepaired after being struck by lightning. However, they didn't get very far before being caught. This justified his transfer to the most secure prison in the state, the Ohio State Penitentiary in Youngstown, where he was subjected to increased security measures and restrictions. The maximum security level applied to him was preventive custody due to the severity of his killing of 3 people in 2012 at Chardon High School and his threats against the lives of other inmates. He was eventually transferred to the Warren Correctional Institution to live out his remaining years. Number 9. Vincent Rodriguez. In January 2002, Vincent Rodriguez, an 18-year-old student at Martin Luther King Jr. High School, committed an atrocious act by taking the lives of 2 students who had taunted his girlfriend. Although he had to face the legal consequences of those acts, his life behind bars was not only a just punishment for the serious crime he committed, but also a circumstance that led him to madness. A few days before the incident, the 2 victims, Andre Wilkins and Andrew Napper, had an altercation with Rodriguez's girlfriend and started a fight. Rodriguez, probably trying to be the boyfriend of the year, went to rescue her, but the odds were against him. There wasn't much he could do in that situation, so he decided to bring a gun to school and prove to his girlfriend that he was indeed a tough guy. At 7:46 a.m. on January 14, 2002, Rodriguez passed through the school's metal detectors, entering the premises. It was believed at that time that he wasn't carrying a weapon because the detectors didn't go off. However, at around 1:50 p.m., Rodriguez walked out and confronted the victims in a hallway. During the confrontation, 3 shots were heard within the school premises as students sought safety. Rodriguez fled the building, leading to a manhunt. After 96 hours, Rodriguez was found in a stolen Nissan car, along with 2 of his friends at his grandmother's doorstep. It was really difficult to catch this guy. Reports indicated that Rodriguez attended school so infrequently that many students didn't even know who he was. He was later arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault, and other minor charges. But here's the twist. Rodriguez could have easily been sentenced to the maximum penalty of 25 years if he had gone to trial. Instead, his guilty plea and his history of mental illness and fear of gang violence convinced Manhattan Supreme Court Judge Daniel Fitzgerald to give him a break. He was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, an institution that has gained notoriety for the deeply inhumane treatment it dispenses to inmates. In some cases, inmates are forced to remain in solitary confinement. Others are subjected to physical abuse until they lose consciousness at the hands of guards. In the case of Rodriguez, he was constantly harassed by older inmates for being a sucker for his girlfriend outside. To be more specific, all this happened because Wilkin and Napper, the victims of his shooting, took his girlfriend's scarf in the school hallway. That could have easily been overlooked, but not by Rodriguez. Although we have no evidence that he served his entire sentence, we have good reason to believe that all the time he spent in this contemporary purgatory facility was nothing short of agonizing. Number 8, Stephen R. Williams, 10:30 a.m., April 14, 2003. 2 armed men, one with an AK-47 and the other with a semi-automatic pistol, entered John McDonough High School in New Orleans, Louisiana. Their mission was to kill a student named Jonathan. Unfortunately, they succeeded, but the repercussions turned out to be much more severe than they had anticipated. The 2 men in question were Stephen R. Williams and James Tate. However, they had other accomplices. On the day of the incident, they entered the campus through a broken fence and headed to the gym, where they knew Jonathan would be. Once inside, they located him and shot him at least 20 times. 3 other students were injured in the process, and a pregnant senior nearly died after being trampled by a stampede of students. Williamson and Tate immediately fled the scene. That wasn't the end of the story. During police interrogation, it was discovered that Williams and Tate killed Jonathan because they believed he had orchestrated the murder of another high school student a week before his own death. The student in question was Hillard H. Smith, who was found dead in front of an abandoned house. Although no arrests were made for Smith's death,
Así
word
que, a su
spread
vez,
that Jonathan
la
was the
novia de
killer.
Smith, Michelle
So in
Fulton,
turn, Smith's
y su primo
girlfriend,
Raymond
Michelle
Brown
Fulton,
contrataron
and her
a
cousin,
Tate y
Raymond
Williams
Brown,
para
hired Tate
asesinar a
and Williams to
Jonathan.
kill Jonathan. After the crime was committed, the police used information obtained from John McDonough High School students to locate and arrest Williams and Tate. Before that, during the autopsy, it was discovered that Jonathan had a gun in his pocket when Williams and Tate shot him. The crazy twist was that their bullets matched those found in Smith's body. Tate pleaded guilty to manslaughter and conspiracy to commit second-degree murder and received a 15-year sentence, while Williams, who initially pleaded not guilty, was found guilty by a competent jury and received a mandatory life sentence. As is customary in Louisiana law, Williams, as part of his sentence, will serve 40 years of hard labor and will not be eligible for parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. In summary, Williams will spend his days in this realm of torment. Number 7, Brenda Ann Spencer. On January 29, 1979, Brenda Ann opened fire at Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego, California, using a rifle her father had given her for Christmas. She killed 2 adults, wounded 8 others, and a police officer and 8 children were injured by gunfire. It was a heinous and horrible crime. Although the sinister act did not go unpunished by the law, her life in prison served as a reminder that murderers deserve nothing but the worst. Born on April 3, 1962 in San Diego, California, Spencer's life was marked by difficult circumstances from an early age, exacerbated by her troubled upbringing. She grew up in a broken home, her father had alcohol problems, and he abandoned the family, leaving Brenda and her 2 siblings in the care of their mother. For Spencer, poverty was a daily occurrence served on a plate of instability. She had a history of truancy and showed signs of substance abuse at an early age. All these factors guided her down the deep and dark path that ultimately shaped the course of her life. It has now been revealed that Spencer's motivation for the shooting was a combination of personal grievances and a desire for attention. During the incident, when asked why she did it, she infamously replied, "I don't like Mondays." After her arrest, Brenda pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. On April 4, 1980, she was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Regarding the charges, she was sentenced to 25 years to life at the California Institution for Women in Corona, where she initially worked repairing electronics to be useful. But after a few years, she began looking for a way out. In 1993, she was granted parole at her first hearing. She stated that she had hoped the police would shoot her at the crime scene and that she had consumed alcohol and drugs before committing the crime. Although the drug test conducted did not corroborate that claim, the test conducted after her initial arrest came back negative. In 2001, at her second parole hearing, Spencer claimed that her father had subjected her to beatings and sexual abuse. However, her father effortlessly denied these accusations. The parole board president said that since she hadn't told anyone about the accusations before, he doubted their authenticity, and I think anyone would. But despite being denied again, her request to leave this hellish replica of a dungeon only intensified. In 2005, she tried to play the insanity card to be sent to a psychiatric hospital, claiming that the words she had carved into her arm were courage and pride instead of no forgiveness and P. This matter dragged on for years until 2009, when a board once again denied her parole request and ruled that it would not be reconsidered for another 10 years. Right now, after more than 4 decades behind bars, Brenda Ann Spencer remains incarcerated at the California Institution for Women. Her next chance will be in 2025. Will she be granted parole? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. Number 6, Eric Houston. On May 1st, 1992, 20-year-old Eric Houston, a former student at Lyndhurst High School in Olivehurst, California, arrived on campus armed with a 12-gauge air shotgun and a sawed-off .22 caliber rifle. Upon entering the premises, he fatally shot Robert Bren, his former civics teacher, during his senior year. He then shot and killed Judy Davis, a student in Bren's class. Houston then walked down the hallway and fatally shot student Jason Edward White in the chest. At this point, the entire school was on lockdown. However, Houston was far from completing his killing spree. He entered a classroom with about 30 students and forced another 50 to take hostages. And if you're wondering how he got out of this bewildering situation, you first have to understand the catalyst that pushed Houston to this level of madness. Without going into too much detail, Houston was frustrated over losing his job and angry that he hadn't graduated from high school or earned his GED. To give context, Houston had attended Lyndhurst High School before dropping out due to poor grades. From there, he disconnected from reality and ended up failing in life. His girlfriend left him, he lost his job, and he was unhappy with everything. He also harbored resentment towards his civics teacher, Mr. Bren, for failing an economics class in '89. But of course, none of this is an excuse to kill anyone, right? Well, to Houston it was. So after gathering 80 hostages into a single classroom, Houston engaged in an 8-hour standoff with the police, releasing several students throughout the day while negotiating with the police. He finally surrendered to authorities around 10 p.m. after receiving a contract promising him no more than 5 years in a minimum security prison. Here is my translation of the provided Spanish text into English. Now over 40 years old, he spends his time on death row awaiting execution. He is locked up in San Quentin State Prison, California, the oldest in the state. It is the only death row in California for male inmates. Houston has not behaved well since being incarcerated, but at the same time he will become the first person executed by the state of California since 2006. He will be executed by lethal injection, as it is the only form of execution allowed by California law. While on death row, Houston has appealed his sentence. But according to the California Supreme Court's decision, his trial was fair and his death sentence was upheld. Number 5, Charles Andrew Williams. Have you ever experienced bullying and humiliation? Did you ask a counselor for help, but in the end, you were denied that opportunity? Can you imagine that kind of frustration? Well, you can try to imagine what went through Charles Andrew Williams' mind before carrying out this incident that changed the course of his life forever. Born on February 8, 1986 in Frederick, Maryland, Williams had a troubled upbringing. His parents divorced when he was young, and he had a strained relationship with his father. His mother, Melinda, suffered from mental health issues and drug addiction. The family moved to California, where Williams enrolled at Santana High School in Santee. Bullying from his classmates and isolation from social activities eventually awakened in Williams a sixth sense to gain some popularity, and by that we mean carrying out one of the most scandalous school shootings of all time. On March 5, 2001, Williams brought a .22 caliber revolver to that high school in Santee, California, to carry out this attack. The incident resulted in the death of 2 students and injured 13 others. After the crime, Charles was arrested and charged with murder and attempted murder. The following year, he pleaded guilty to the charges against him in an effort to avoid trial. Consequently, he was sentenced to between 50 years and life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was initially ordered to serve his sentence in the California Youth Authority's juvenile offender program until he turned 18. On March 1, 2004, Charles Williams was transferred to an adult prison. But here's something. While in prison, he was kept in protective custody because he refused to stab another inmate. Saddened by that incident and harboring remorse, Williams stated in an interview that he believes he deserves to be where he is. Despite expressing that prison is challenging, he has persevered through the difficulties. On the other hand, he has embarked on a journey, a different journey, finding his faith in Christianity and hoping to achieve a better life than the one he had lived. Currently incarcerated at the California Institution for Men in Chino, California, Williams will be eligible for parole in March 2051 at the age of 65. Number 4. Jason Clenard. On March 2, 2005, Jason fired 3 times with a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol at his school bus driver, a lady named Joyce Gregory, after she opened the loading doors. He then fled into the woods behind his house and disappeared. A day before that incident, Joyce reported Clenard to school authorities for having used smokeless tobacco on the bus. Obviously, this enraged Jason to the point that he secretly brought a gun to school and waited until they were about to drop him off in front of his house to fire at will. After being shot several times, Joyce tried to call for help, collapsed on the floor, and lost control of the bus. One of Jason's nephews, who was also on that bus, tried to get all the children to safety but ended up crashing into a pole. Realizing what he had done, Jason immediately called his mother, telling her what had happened and that he was heading to the police station. In turn, Jason would be arrested. Despite being a minor, he was tried as an adult, which earned him a 51-year sentence at the Northeast Correctional Complex in Tennessee. However, his life in prison is not what one might think. While here, Jason appealed half a dozen times to be exempted.
Así
At
que,
the
a
same
su vez,
time, he was
la novia de
diagnosed
Smith,
with certain
Michelle
mental
Fulton,
conditions
y
that
su
drove
primo
him to
Raymond
carry out
Brown
the shooting that day.
contrataron a Tate y Williams
Nevertheless, the
para asesinar a
prosecution believed
Jonathan.
it was a premeditated murder, and some 24 more students witnessed that traumatic event. As the years went by, Jason maintained his best behavior and did everything possible to remain in good standing with the law. In September 2023, after 18 and a half years, Jason Clenard left the Northeast Correctional Complex and was no longer under judicial supervision, meaning he was not on parole. He had been sentenced as a 9th grade student, but took the initiative and obtained a GED while incarcerated. And although this news greatly angered Joyce Gregory's family, many people believe that what happened in Clenard's life while he was behind bars and the experiences he must have gained could have been enough to pay for a better future. Number 3, TJ Wimberly. We've all been through a situation where we wanted to be with someone, so we went for it, maybe making insinuations, only to face rejection. The inability to cope with that is what pushed Tia into a life consumed by overwhelming remorse and unbearable pain. Born on September 30th, 1993, Wimberly was left in the care of her grandparents at 6 weeks old. Her parents separated before she was born, so Wimberly suffered sexual abuse by a relative throughout her childhood. As teenagers, TJ Wimberly and Amanda Collette, both sophomores at Dillard High School, were very good friends since elementary school, but stopped talking by chance, or so it seemed at the time. Wimberly was interested in her own way, was making advances, seeking a romantic relationship. But Collette wasn't interested and rejected Wimberly's advances. This enraged her, turning her love into an obsession to kill. On November 12, 2008, Wimberly brought a .22 caliber to school, approached Colette, and tried to start a conversation with her. However, she simply walked away, which forced her to pull out her gun and shoot Colette in the back. Realizing the serious mistake she had made, Tia ran to a local restaurant where she called 911 to report what she had done. The police soon arrived, arrested her, confiscated the weapon, and charged her as an adult. Initially, she was ordered to be imprisoned for 21 days and undergo a psychological evaluation before a subsequent trial where she would be charged with second-degree murder and discharging a firearm on school property for the murder of Amanda Collette. At the trial, she wrote a special apology to Colette's mother saying, "I took Amanda from you," and also apologized to her own family. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison at the Florida Women's Reception Center. She served the first part of her sentence in a juvenile facility and was later transferred to an adult prison. Like other inmates, during her incarceration, she participated in character-based programs along with other activities planned for her. Her release is scheduled for March 12, 2033. Number 2, John Jason McLaughlin. On September 24, 2003, John arrived at Rocori High School in Minnesota with a loaded .22 caliber Colt pistol with the intention of killing one of his biggest bullies, named Bartell. However, this only prepared McLaughlin for a life of pain and misery. Born on July 19, 1988, Jason was the only child of Mary and David McLaughlin. He was a reserved child who liked to help his parents a lot without complaining. Hanging out with his peers and playing video games were activities he also loved. But over time, he became more reserved and withdrawn. Why? Well, he developed severe acne. It is believed that his self-consciousness about the acne was due to some kids picking on him, especially a boy named Seth Bartell, who wouldn't stop doing it. What Seth didn't know was that Jason couldn't take it anymore. On the day of the incident, Jason encountered Seth and his friend Rollins as they were leaving the school locker rooms. Upon seeing him, he shot at Bartell, hitting him in the chest. Jason would fire a second shot, hitting Rollins in the neck, killing him instantly. Bartell, who was bleeding profusely at this point, tried to flee the scene, but was followed by McLaughlin, who fired again and hit him in the forehead. Mark Johnson, the gym coach, approached to confront Jason, who initially brandished the weapon at Johnson, but then emptied the bullets from the gun and dropped it. Mark obtained the firearm and escorted McLaughlin to the school administration office, where the police arrived to arrest him. On July 5, 2005, when the trial began, 6 doctors appeared to testify before the court and declared that Jason was fit to stand trial. As a result, Jason was found guilty of first and second-degree murder, and a few months later, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive prison terms: life imprisonment for first-degree murder and 12 years in prison for second-degree murder, all to be served concurrently. Additionally, the court ordered him to pay a restitution fine of $15,000 to the Minnesota Crime Victims Reparations Board. Initially, he was incarcerated at the Minnesota Correctional Facility Stillwater, where he participated in various programs, from industrial and educational to the chemical dependency treatment program in Atlanta. After a few years there, he was then transferred to this facility, the Minnesota Correctional Facility Oak Park Heights, and will not be eligible for parole until 2038, when he will be 50 years old. Number 1, Jason Anthony Hoffman. Now, besides being a rather big guy, often called an adult, Jason was known for his good manners, his friendliness, and for gaining a lot of respect from students, perhaps out of fear of his stature or perhaps because of his seemingly charming personality. But a significant trait Hoffman had was difficulty controlling his anger. Born on March 10, 1983, young Hoffman resided with his single mother, Denise Marquez, and was recognized for actively helping in the neighborhood. However, it became evident that he harbored a troubled mind influenced by a series of events. On one hand, the vice principal of Granite Hills High School regularly disciplined him for undisclosed reasons, and on the other, he experienced anguish when trying to enlist in the Navy 2 days before the tragic incident, only to face rejection. The reason for the rejection remains unclear, but its effect on Hoffman was very evident. On March 22, 2001, Hoffman, who had just turned 18, headed to his school in a van armed with a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 pistol. A few minutes before 1 p.m., he headed towards the administration building in search of the vice principal. Upon seeing him, Hoffman opened fire but missed the target. He would end up wounding 3 students and 2 teachers. He was finally stopped by a police officer and was shot twice in the buttocks. He was taken to the hospital for treatment, and once discharged, he was arrested and charged with attempted murder. During the trial, Hoffman pleaded guilty to 6 felony charges. At the time of making this statement, his lawyer, Mr. Trainer, stated that Hoffman was extraordinarily remorseful for his actions, but that did not influence the jury in his favor. After being tried for a few months, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. That sentence marked the beginning of his end. On October 29, 2001, shortly before 1 a.m. at the San Diego Central Jail, Jason Anthony Hoffman took his own life with a sheet in his cell. He was a troubled young man who met a moving and painful death,